you. So good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today, almost 5 years after I started working as a researcher on the ADOCHS project. And as Nico said before, in these 5 years, things have changed a lot. And I find a bit crazy to think that my PhD thesis defended last year may already be a bit out of date. So that's why today I'm going to talk about a problem that is unfortunately timeless, metadata debt, but let's see what it is. So I think you all recognize this image. As you know, the web is full of broken links, and this problem is not unique to the web because we live in a broken world. And this is what researchers working on maintenance theory tell us. By default, the world is broken and things will become inoperable. So the only way to fight against this broken character is the daily and often invisible work of maintainers. So I have used this theoretical framework to address metadata quality issue. And this means, for example, in a library context, that when maintaining information systems, we have to take into account that concept and realities are changing. So in addressing this issue in the context of archives and libraries, I came across another interesting concept, which is the technical debt. So this metaphor was first used in the 90s by someone called Ward Cunningham in the software development context. So in summary, when we have to maintain things like, for example, software, and we don't take the time to do things properly because we lack money or time, and we, for example, we don't rewrite code correctly, we create a technical debt. So this means that when we don't take the time to write or rewrite the code or the documentation correctly, there is a lack of quality, and that make it harder if we want to modify or extend the system further. So the more we wait, the more it will require extra efforts, and these extra efforts can be seen as interest paid on the debt. So this metaphor has been transposed in the library context, where the code is replaced by the metadata management. And this metaphor can be used at different levels, and I have decided to focus on how to improve metadata quality in the semantic web context. So let's start with an example. So I worked on a case study about the people linked to the CegeSoma collection. So CegeSoma is part of the Belgian State Archives. And you see here an overview of all the different nominative files I found at the beginning of the project. And as you can see, there is no single authority file. And of course, the files are not connected to each other. It would be too easy. So if we take an example, for example, André de Jong, who is a young woman involved in the resistance in Belgium during the Second World War. You can see here the metadata describing the picture, and these metadata are text strings. So they contain several pieces of information, but they are not really structured, and they are kind of semantically poor, because it means that a machine would not be able to interpret precisely the content, and it would cause several problems like bad search precision or noise when end users would make some queries about her in a digital catalog. So in 2 words, there is room for improvements in terms of data quality. So, moreover, there is no external link made to other institutions processing documents about her. And there is also no possibility currently to refer to her in the CegeSoma collection through a persistent identifier, which is one of the good practices of the on the semantic web. So one of a good example of structured data which are machine readable, multilingual, and linked to external identifiers is Wikidata. So Wikidata is a knowledge graph which stores factual data. For example, here you can see the info box that dedicated to André de Jong on a Wikipedia page, and the info box is updated and synchronized via Wikidata. And the good news is that Wikibase, which is the software behind Wikidata, is freely available. So that's how I ended up creating a Wikibase instance for the CegeSoma authority data. So at the top of the screen, you can see the unique identifier for André de Jong, and below you have an overview of data about her, which are stored in a format that is both human and machine readable. This is another view of this data. So you can see the result when the semantic metadata debt has been paid. We have structured data, machine readable, and they are also linked to external identifier like Wikidata. So we don't have anymore this problem of ambiguity and potentially noise in the research, because the machine can interpret every pieces of information. The same data can also be displayed as a graph of linked data. So paying down this metadata debt, one kind of metadata debt, we can find another types of debt, means for user the ability to do more than before, so they can refine searches with less noise and ambiguity, for example, by using Sparkle queries based on characteristics such as the gender, a birthplace, etc. So I show you an example how we can improve user experience, for example, by giving new way of accessing data. So this is an example of a resistance member related to a specific archival records of CegeSoma, and we can see on a map the places where they were shot during the war. So it was not possible before because the places were not linked to coordinates, location, etc. We also have new possibilities if we link one person to external identifier. For example, we can interconnect data which were isolated with other repositories. So once a link has been created with the corresponding Wikidata entity, we can retrieve, for example, via a federated Sparkle query, any information published on Wikidata about that person. So for example, occupation, political party affiliation, awards received, and even more interesting for us, we can see if other institutions are holding archives about this person. So potentially in the user interface of the digital catalog, we could add some information where you can put other archival material about this person. So by improving metadata quality, we can therefore also improve user experience by offering much more contextual information. So that was the first step. So between 2016 and 20, I look at the management of archival authority data in the context of link open data, and I explore this through a PhD thesis and a Wikibase prototype, which are both available online. So if you want to explore this topic in 400 pages instead of only 20 minutes, you can download my thesis by following this link, and you can also visit the Wikibase prototype made in the context of ADOCHS. And I have also published online some explanation and code to perform operations such as retrieving Wikibase data via an API, the Sparkle service, or also performing federated Sparkle queries. So this was the first step, and the second step started in spring 2021. So I am lucky enough to continue working at the CegeSoma State Archives, and the idea was to continue the work carried out in the ADOCHS project at a broader level through the Wikibase Resistance project. So this project, led by the CegeSoma, aims to improve access to data concerning more than 160,000 people who were recognized as members of resistance activities after the Second World War by the Belgian state. And for each of these persons, the State Archives hold personal files. So the goal is to create a better access to the content of these files, and to allow users to search for a specific person, but also based on characteristics such as the location where people lived during the war, or networks of resistance, etc. So for now, it's only about resistance members, but in the longer term, it could involve integrated data concerning other types of entities into this Wikibase instance. And for the moment, we are still at the beginning of the project. So, but we have already a dozen volunteers, which are already very active to encode data and also avoid creating debt from the directly from the encoding step by using control vocabularies, geonames, links, etc. So I wanted to show the other side of the story, because we are in a context with a lot of budget cuts and limited resources. So I wanted also to show you today that even if we don't have a very sophisticated encoding interface or system, we can start directly at the first step. But for example, we have the constraint to work with Excel files, because we work with elderly volunteers, and they are used to have very easy to access encoding space. So maybe in the future this will change, but this was our starting point. So this is an illustration that even if you don't have a lot of resources, you can start to think about this metadata debt at the first step by, for example, separating each piece of information in different columns, standardizing data as much as possible, for example, with control vocabularies, or using external identifiers, so URI, for example, for place names, for person entities, etc., and also by creating metadata about metadata to know when the file has been created, etc. So this is maybe the takeaway I would like to share with you. So act now to avoid paying interest on the debts later. So you will have less interest to pay later. So thank you for your attention. And this is the end of my presentation. I would be glad to answer questions.